Every year, thousands of applicants hit submit on their ERAS application, and many of them lose interview even before the program director sets eyes on their application. And this is because of so many invisible mistakes and errors that are made that nobody talks about. And in this video, we're going to be breaking them down completely. You have worked so hard from USMLE Step 1 up until this moment. The amount of mental torture and mental stamina it takes to get to this moment is incredible. Do not allow these mistakes to ruin your chances. At the end of this video, you should have all the tools that is needed to be able to make you excel and make you stand out in your application season. Now let's get to it. One of the first questions you need to ask yourself is, who is the first person that screens my application? Most people think that the first person to look at your application is your program director, but actually it's not correct. Most programs, the first person to look at the application is the program coordinator, and in some other programs is the associate program director. This means that you have a couple of sets of eyes that take a look at your CV. More often than not, these people are looking for specific things that will rule you in or rule you out. One of the easiest things to rule you out is grammatical errors. You need to make sure that your application does not have grammatical errors. That's the first thing. Second thing is consistency across board. So whatever approach that you started writing your CV with, you want to maintain that approach throughout your entire CV to keep it very organized and very, very appealing to the eye. That is also something that will rule you in. You don't want to have different approach in one section, not different approach in one section. You want to keep it consistent throughout. The reason for this is because think about the first person looking at your CV as like best checkpoints. Someone is trying to look for faults or look for strengths to either take you out of the pool or bring you into the pool for interview. Now, how I want you to think about this is to pause this video now and go back to your CV and look at your CV and check for rotations that overlap. For example, if you have a rotation that you did 2 months in, and you had another rotation that you did 3 months in, but for some reason they overlap by a month. So it's not really possible that you were in 2 places at the same time. But if you were, that's fine. But if you are not, you want to be able to catch that so that you keep your dates, consistent. For those of you who currently struggle with any sections in your CV, let me know in the comment section which part of your CV you're struggling with. The next one is the timing of psychology. And what does this mean? What people don't know is that when interviews start rolling out, actually your CVs do not get looked at the same time. They get looked at on a rolling basis. So when you submitted your CV, the application gets divided based on, it depends. It can be based on your surname, it can be based on your scores, it can be based on your country. They just batch the applications and then they start going through them in small bits. And this means that your application can get seen in the morning or your application can get seen in the evening at whenever time that they're going through your CV. But there is a chance that if they look at your application in the morning because they're very, very full of energy at that time, they pay attention to your application. But there is also a chance that they can lay eyes on your application in the evening when they are tired. So what you need to understand is everything changes as soon as your application is being looked at in the morning versus in the evening. Because in the morning, people are very energetic, but in the evenings, people are tired, right? They're just skimming through real quick and they're looking for things that catches their eye or throws them off. That's what they're doing. So you have to be able to do 2 things. 1, write a CV that is impressive to somebody who reads in the morning, but also 2, you have to make a CV that somebody who is tired 11 p.m. is able to still look at it and get something positive from it and still think that this application is solid. That is how you want to think about it. Timing is invisible, but it's actually powerful because a tired reader at night doesn't admire your elegant speech. So how do you fix this? 1, you front load your impact. And what does this mean? It means that when you write on your CV, you want to be able to put your impact as soon as possible. In my previous videos, I've talked about how you arrange your CV. You put them in bullet points, but you want to get to the point SAP. You don't want to be dilly-dallying around. Most program directors, most people look into your CV because they're looking at it with so much speed. They always pay attention to the first 3 bullets or the first 4 bullets. So within the first 3 to 4 bullets, you want to put your impact in that position. You want to have them see ASAP. If you let the best things that you did towards the bottom of your experience, they may get skipped. So you want to front load your impact. Sounds good? Number 2, cut the fluff. And what does this mean? This means that when you write your CV, you want to use as little words as possible to convey the most important messages. This means that you have to use short but powerful phrases to explain what your application is about. Cut the fluff. Number 3, consistent narrative. And what this means is that when the reader, like the program director or the program coordinator, is going through your CV, if they drop your CV and go to pay attention to something, they should be able to come back and pick your CV up and continue right from when they stopped. And how do you achieve this? You want to create your CV around a narrative, around a persona. You don't want to make your CV scattered and all over the place. You want to keep the focus of your CV in a very, very distinct area that is particular to your strengths. So you build your CV around your strengths. But when they pick up your CV, they're like, oh yes, I recall this guy. Okay. Of course, this is particular for the personal statement section. You want to start with a scenario that blows their mind. And so this will complement your CV and it will make you stand out really, really well. Okay. You want to create that lasting memory across your application so that when they look at your application, from the moment they open your CV to the moment they look at your personal statement, you just hold their attention. So in summary, you want to front load your impact, you want to cut the fluff, you want to show a consistent narrative, and you want to open with a very strong personal statement hook. Now, for those of you who have any struggles with any part of these sections of your CV, leave your comment in the comment section. I'll reply them with a tip. Now, you've done all these things. The next step is to unlock your secret weapon, and that is your hobbies. The thing I found interesting is that most people actually are worried about the hobbies section, and I think it's because most people have hobbies, but they're not sure exactly how it helps them or how it hurts them. And most people don't also know how to communicate their hobbies. Well, let's tackle that. See, the hobby section is actually one of the most ignored sections, but actually it's one of the sections that you should definitely take advantage of. Now, I talk about this every single time because it's very important. Your hobbies can be the only discussion you have during your interview, and that is just because, people get bored about talking about your achievements. They get bored talking about even patient care sometimes. The reason is because this is what they do all day long, every single day, 365, right? So they are not as excited sometimes when you talk about stuff that everybody talks about. Talk about your scores, talk about your medical school, talk about that's very interesting. But when it comes to the hobbies, you can get real connection there. So if you, for example, play golf or you play cricket or hockey, and the person that is interviewing you also plays that game, or the person is married to somebody who loves that game, knows about that game, that is all you talk about, right? When they have that discussion with you, they go back home, they talk to their spouse. Oh, I met this guy, he loves cricket. He talked to me that he watched this match between India and Pakistan, and so they're talking about it with you, and they're talking about it with their spouse, and that means you are likely to get ranked highly. So the idea is, how do you use your hobbies to get you interviews and even get you ranked highly? It goes back to what we talked about earlier, to front load your impact. And what does this mean? It means that even when you talk about your hobbies, you should talk about the impact of your hobbies. For example, instead of saying something like, I love reading, I love cooking, you say something like, completed 3 marathons, raising $10,000 for charity. Now, you see the difference between I love marathon and I completed 3 marathons, raising $10,000 for charity. That is a huge difference. And now people will say, but I didn't raise $10,000 for charity. Let's take a step back. Some of the marathons that we run are actually, the aim of those marathons are to raise funds. So just think back about the marathons that you ran. What was the core goal of that marathon? If that marathon had a core goal, then you are a part of that goal. You help achieve that goal. These are the things that will spark conversations in your interview. And because they're talking about your hobbies, it's going to be a more relaxed interview. People just look at your hobbies and say, this person looks interesting, let's interview them. It actually happens, especially if your application is pretty solid and they look at your hobbies and like, oh, this is an interesting person, let's get them here. So don't sleep on your hobbies. Take it very serious. Those of you who have questions about what kind of hobbies that you want to represent and how to coin your hobbies, you can leave a comment in the comment section. I'm going to reply you with tips. Now, you've tackled your hobbies, you've tackled your initial application, you've made sure that your application can go through checklists of multiple audiences, and now you're going to the next section, which is one of the most important sections of your application. But most people ignore this part, and the reason why most people ignore this part is because most people have very little control over this part, and this part is your letters of recommendation. Your letter of recommendation is one of the most important application piece that you have to tender. And for the application, you want to apply with 3 minimum letters, including your program director or your school's dean. But most programs actually encourage you to apply with 4 letters. This is very important because in your letter of recommendation, they have very objective criteria that your recommenders actually use in your letter that tells the program director what kind of a candidate you are. Your letter of recommendation is so important that if your letter of recommendation is weak, then your chances for match really gets hurt. But what is even worse, a late letter of recommendation. When we upload our letter of recommendation to ERAS, it may take a few days, sometimes even up to a week before ERAS releases that letter, and you can now use that letter to apply for residency. Do not fall in the trap of waiting last minute to get your letters uploaded. It can take a few days, especially towards the deadline. You want to upload your letters as soon as possible, because if your letters are incomplete, there is a chance that your application might get filtered. Now, there are ways around this. You could typically submit your application and then email the program that you now have your letters. That may work, for a few programs, but for the most part, you want to send in your application on time. Don't wait for the deadline. Try and upload your letters with a minimum of 4 weeks. If you can, minimum 4 weeks. Upload it 4 weeks before ERAS deadline. I know there's a question about what is a strong letter, what is a weak letter, what is an average letter. Let me break it down. A weak letter is that letter that praises you when the praises are vague, when they are generic, that could be applied to any single person. That is a letter that is weak. Program directors, reviewers can tell off the bat that this is a letter written to somebody that doesn't necessarily know the capacity of this person in depth. A letter of recommendation that is average is supportive, but it's flat. It's flat in the sense that while it's supportive, it doesn't necessarily sound excited for you. It doesn't sound like super impressed. And that letter doesn't hurt you. It doesn't necessarily help you, but it doesn't hurt you. But a weak letter definitely hurts you. Now, what is an impressive letter of recommendation? What is that letter of recommendation that blows everybody's mind? Well, it's that letter of recommendation that talks about the candidate specifically. It talks about your strengths in bedside, your strengths with your colleagues, your strengths outside the clinic, your extracurricular strengths. It talks about personal experiences and encounters with you and the letter writers. The letter writers talk about you with so much respect, so much admiration, and it is woven with personal stories. You will keep getting people talking about that letter during your interviews, and then you will know that that letter was fantastic. And how I think, I talked about how to get a strong letter recommendation because it is very important. You could check out my previous videos for that. In summary, that letter will speak to you in a 360 degrees. It will talk about you in a holistic manner. That's a letter of recommendation that will set you apart. Now, most of us do not see the content of our letter of recommendation, and that is where it gets tricky. A few of us are lucky to have letter writers have us do the first draft. That is fantastic. For those of you who need, who have questions about your letter of recommendation, you can leave a comment down below. I'm going to answer you with tips. But most of us don't see the content of our letter of recommendation. So what you need to do is you need to give your letter writers data that will accurately reflect what you want captured in your letter of recommendation. So you want to give them your CV, your personal statement, little notes like event notes, things that happened during your rotation that they might have forgotten about, and they can put it in that letter. You want to make sure that you don't leave it to chance. That is how you go about trying to control the narrative around your letter of recommendation. Now you have a strong letter of recommendation and you have done a fantastic job in outlining your impact in your application. This is fantastic. The next question that we have is the question about competitiveness. I think that this is important because most of us don't know that we do it, even though we actually are doing it. And what does that mean? When you put stuff on your CV, there is this natural temptation to want to overstuff your CV. You only want to put stuff in your CV that directly adds value to your application. You want to keep your CV laser focused. Now, I always talk about applying to one specialty, but if you apply to more than one specialty, you want to only have the things that speak to both specialties on your CV. Anything that is outside of those things, take them out. Except the things that you want to include have very, very, very strong indications to be there. For example, teaching. If you were a teacher before medical school, you can add that to your CV. That's fine. But if you don't have something that is very, very strong and compelling, just take it out. You can mention about it in a line or two in your personal statement, but you want to keep your CV very concise, high yield, that every single line, every single bullet point counts. Don't waste the space and don't jam pack your CV such that we are looking for the details and looking for a needle in a haystack. Avoid that temptation. People think that makes them competitive, but actually it doesn't. The length of your CV doesn't matter. It's the substance of your CV that matters. The next mistake you want to avoid is the mistake of the repetition trap. And what does this mean? It means that we as candidates, we have some specific experiences that we are personally proud of. And sometimes there's a temptation to put those experiences in multiple sections. For example, you want to put that experience in your CV. You also want to put it in your personal statement. You also want to put it in your research experience. Try to avoid repeating the things that you put in your CV. At best, what you can do is you can reframe it. For example, in your CV, you say, I led a project, but in your personal statement, you say, leading that project taught me to be a team player and understand the rules of healthcare. You get it? So that's the idea. If you must repeat, then you don't use the same, you kind of coin it in a different phase, what you did, and then in your personal statement is what you learned. The next thing we have to focus on is what I see very often among applicants, and that is focusing on the wrong thing. When we write our experience, we actually are very focused on the task, but that is not correct. Instead of focusing on the task act that you did, you're supposed to focus on the outcome. What does this mean? Now let me explain. A lot of people are very happy to write something like, I manage 10 patients, presented in rounds. That's just task. What you're supposed to be interested in is focusing on the outcomes. The task is very important, but more important is the outcome. So you can say something like, manage 10 patients daily, leading to faster team decisions and smoother discharges. So now that you've mentioned the task, you've gone ahead to talk about what the outcome, the task was. That outcome is actually just as important, if not more important than the task you did. So you have to rephrase your understanding and approach. Include your outcomes. Very important. The tasks make you blend in, but the outcomes make you stand out. Because while the task for you and I might be the same, the outcomes are not necessarily the same. So the outcomes are sort of personalized. And the reason why this is important is that when you interview, when they ask you about your experiences, they look into your CV and sometimes their eye catches the outcomes. Instantly, their interest speaks. They're like, oh wow, so you were able to increase discharges? Can you tell me a little bit about that? And the reason that is important is because when you highlight the outcomes of your rotations you did and your experience, it tells us about the real world impact of the rotations you did. And that is something that most clinicians can relate with. That is something that they want to hear you talk about. So just writing about the outcomes of what you did is a very, very good springboard for a conversation. In essence, you are trying to control the conversation that are going to happen during your interview day, right? And that is a very, very good place for you to start. Now you've done all these things. The next question is one of the things that I see most people fall prey to. It's a trap that most people are actually falling for these days, and that is voice mismatch. What does that mean? Voice mismatch simply means that the way you sound on paper is different from what an actual human being sounds like. And why is that? It's because most people have been using AI. for the application. Now, there is nothing wrong with using AI. Honestly, if you go to the ERAS website, there is a section on the website that says that using AI is okay as long as it maintains your original voice. It is okay. It's not AI in itself that is the problem. The problem is losing your voice to AI. There is a way humans sound that AI doesn't sound like. And even though you tell your AI, oh, ChatGPT, do not sound like a human being, it still sounds like AI. And once we pick up the application, we can tell that it's AI. So you want to try and keep your authenticity as much as possible. Now, AI has its place. It can help you with grammar check. It can help you with answer some questions, but you want to keep your voice as authentic as possible. And I remember one program director saying that he would rather have a rough draft of a personal statement or CV that sounds like a human than a perfect personal statement that sounds like AI. So you need to be able to balance that and make sure your voice is not lost. And how you can do this yourself is to take out your personal statement and read it out loud and listen to yourself when you read this. Does that sound like you? If it doesn't sound like you, I think you need to sit down and readdress and think about the parts that went wrong, how you can fix them. Now, let's talk about your letter of recommendation. Let's talk about your letter of recommendation very deeply, because this is a ridiculously under-discussed section. This is the place that you win or you lose. Letter of recommendation is a 9.9 over 10. It is so important. We have to talk about it. The first thing is you want to choose your letter writers very wisely. You don't want to choose your letter writers just because of their name or just because you think that they are from a top program. Anybody that gives you a generic letter hurts your application. Even if the person is from top school, if the letter is not outstanding, then they don't help you. Better get a letter from a mid-tier program that talks about you very, very highly than get a letter from a top program that talks about you in a very, very lukewarm manner. If you think for a moment that your letter writer is not giving you a strong letter, if you don't have confidence about that person giving you a strong letter recommendation, I will advise you to find someone else that can give you a strong letter. If you're not confident enough to say, oh, this person will give me something unique, something personalized, something that is not generic, then my advice for you is find someone else who's going to give you a strong personalized letter ASAP, and always waive your right to view your letter. That is a very strong indication that you are confident in this person writing a letter of recommendation for you. Always waive your rights. That is a very important part of the letter of recommendation. If you don't waive your rights, you kind of tell us that you're not very sure of the letter that you're going to get, so you want to have a peep of the letter. That's a red flag. Waive your rights to view letter. In summary, we're doing all these things. One, we're preparing our CV for multiple audiences. The first one is probably the program coordinator or the associate program director, and then the second one is for the program director. Next, we're making it time-proof. Regardless of what time they go through your CV, they are able to take out the important notes on your CV and rank you highly. The third one is CV proof. And in that CV, you are quickly showing your impact, you are quickly showing your outcomes, and you're quickly showing your most important achievements within the first 3 to 4 bullet points. The fourth is your personal statement. You want to open with a hook that captures their attention. 5, you want to have a letter of recommendation from people that you trust that can give you letters that are personalized and strong. You also want to upload those letters very early, 3 to 4 weeks before deadline. And 6, your hobbies. In your hobbies, you want to talk about your identity, you want to talk about the things that excite you, and you want to be able to use your hobbies to connect with people that are interviewing you and reviewing your application. And I saved the last for the best, the 20-second skim test. And what that means is when you pick up your CV, within the first 20 seconds, are you able to look through your CV and appreciate things in your CV that captures your own eyes without bias though? That is the skim test. If you're unable to see something that catches your attention in your CV, on your application within the first 20 seconds, then you probably have to tweak your application. But if you pass that test, and then you are good to go. For those of you who are struggling with any sections in your CV, you can leave a comment in the section below. I'm going to reply you with tips. With these approaches, you are able to use these approaches, implement them in your CV, in your personal statement, and elevate your application to the next level. You should be able to use these tips and stand out. During your interviews and getting interviews and smashing your interviews, you should do fantastic. I encourage you to do your CVs yourself. If you've done your CV, you've gone through all these checklists and you think that you need an extra eye, you can click on the link down below. I wish you guys good luck, and I'll see you guys in the next one.